Another guy who considers himself to be a BMF is Khamzat Chimaev, and who knows, he may compete for that belt one day himself. And I think Kamaru Usman is a very overlooked BMF in his own right. He's ready. He's look. He could have called it a day. Kamaru easily could have been like, after the second loss to Rocky Edwards, you know what? I'm just under George St. Pierre for the best, welterweight of all time. I'm going to call it a day. I'm a millionaire. I'm sponsored by all of these great companies. I was in the Black Panther. I could go into movies. I can do whatever I want. The world is truly Kamaru Usman's oyster, yet he's continuing to fight, saying that he wants to fight the hardest guys, wants to even potentially go up to 185 to fight Khamzat, because Dana said that Khamzat's next fight will be at 185, and he's cool with the Usman fight, but Kamaru needs to come up to middleweight. So, I think Kamaru in a lot of ways gets overlooked for, he doesn't have to fight a guy who's never held a belt before. He doesn't have to fight a guy who's brand new to a division. None of that. But he's choosing to do that because that's who he is. So props to Kamaru. I do kind of think Khamzat would be have an advantage in that fight, but I think it's a great fight, and it's not a gimme for either man.
Yeah, Usman hasn't looked the same ever since he did take those losses from Leon. And Khamzat Chimaev is just one of those guys that we got to see him fight more often, because every time he's in there, it's just the most exciting thing. There's hasn't been a fighter like Conor McGregor in the UFC before or after, but as far as the big fight feel that I get, Khamzat Chimaev is a close second. He's right there. Him and Sugar Sean is starting to get there. There's a couple of people that are really starting to make us feel that certain way that Conor made us feel on his rise to the top, and Khamzat Chimaev sits at the top of that list. But when you see somebody like Usman, who's been the champ, he's beat everybody on his way up. He is a nightmare for a lot of people. He probably sits in the front of a lot of people's minds as, their most difficult day in their entire life, because they had to fight him. So I think that he more than deserves a shot on the BMF short list of fighters. And plus, he's great teammates with Justin Gaethje. So if Dustin's able to win, and he might want to go get some revenge, because as it sits right now, he's not going to get another title shot at 170 for a little while, and that's okay. He doesn't need to go get that belt again, but he's also not going to go to 185 and contest for the belt as long as Izzy's there. So he might as well look in a different direction and go for this belt that doesn't really require a merit, or, it's kind of one of those things that's just subjective. Dana can decide whether or not you're a BMF, and the fans will sign off on it if they agree, and everybody would say that Kamaru Usman certainly is. And that's another way he could fight for a belt. And I think there's great opportunities for him. I think him and Conor would make for a lot of fun. I think, him and Khamzat would make for a lot of fun. So there's plenty for Kamaru to do. I think it's very impressive that he wants to go after the people like Khamzat Chimaev. He could probably settle into fighting a bunch of, former monsters, guys that are on their way out, but they're a little bit older, a little bit closer to his age, and he could have some really fun matchups that the fans would love. But instead, he wants to go to the very top of the mountain, fight the best people in the world, and I commend him for that.
I love it. And he's going to go to Abu Dhabi.
Yeah.
Kamaru's loved all over the world, so it doesn't really matter. But Abu Dhabi, especially for the Muslim fighters, is kind of their backyard. They go there and they get a resounding bump from the crowd. So to go up to 185 as a great former champion like Kamaru, to go up to 185, go into Abu Dhabi and fight Khamzat Chimaev, potentially the best prospect the UFC has right now, this young, hungry warrior, I give him serious credit. Now, I do kind of think that Khamzat will get the better of Kamaru, and I think that fight needs to happen soon. Like, I think the date in the fall is the perfect date for it, because if you start to get more time pass and all of that, Kamaru's getting towards his late 30s, then it becomes not as competitive and not as fun. So I think if they're going to make Boers versus the Nigeria Nightmare, it needs to happen in the fall, and it looks like that's when it will happen. And I can't wait for it. Now, looking